Hello and welcome to this episode of Someone You Know, a podcast about disabilities, those who have them, and those who love them. I'm your host, Andrew Abraham, and today we'll be talking about the importance of peer and self-advocacy when it comes to living with and caring for someone with a disability. Joining me today is Miss Jocelyn Sanders. Jocelyn is a mental health advocate with experience as both a mental health survivor and a caregiver for those with disabilities. Jocelyn's self-advocacy journey led her to UIC, where we were classmates in many disability and human development classes that helped us better understand disabilities through the lens of the social model. Thank you for being here today, Jocelyn. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Self-advocacy is about more than just knowing how to stand up for yourself. And with the help of Jocelyn, today we will explore the intricacies of how to engage in self and peer advocacy in ways that encourage the active participation and positive identity formation of individuals with disabilities. If you or someone you know has a disability, learning about self-advocacy in this context might just help you out in your everyday life. And even if you don't have or don't know someone with a disability, chances are someone you know loves someone with a disability. And by listening here today, you can learn more about how those with disabilities have uplifted their own voices and experience through self-advocacy. Let's get started. Now, like I just mentioned, Jocelyn Sanders is a former classmate of mine from UIC, the University of Illinois, Chicago. We were both disability and human development majors and have experiences caring and advocating for family members with disabilities. If you remember, I mentioned that my first 3 episodes of this podcast were to fulfill the requirements for a few of my classes and my capstone project for my final year at UIC. And Jocelyn was in one of my classes where I presented one of my episodes. And after showing interest, she sent me an email saying that she really liked what I had to say and would be interested in doing an episode focused on disability, peer, and self-advocacy, based on not only her own experiences, but her newfound knowledge of disability studies. I was very happy to hear from her, to hear that she liked my work so much, first of all, and I'm very excited to get to talk to her more about this topic and hear more about her experiences. So without further ado, welcome, Jocelyn.
Hello, glad to be here.
Now, just as a baseline, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to disability?
I'm a 50-ish year old, as you can see, middle-aged African-American woman. I'm a mother of 3 wonderful children, and my journey with disability started 27 years ago. After I had my first daughter, I started experiencing some symptoms. So it took a while until I was able to get the right diagnoses. And then I started medication management, and it was a very, very chaotic place to start. So what I had to do was research disability, find out why I was having symptoms, and try to actively heal myself.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Pregnancy can be very exciting, but also very scary time. So thank you for sharing your experiences, Jocelyn. Now, I introduced you as a classmate of mine from UIC. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you to UIC and specifically to the Disability and Human Development Program?
Partially, my journey in my secondary focus for education was actually planted because of my disability. I was managing my symptoms with therapy, medication, and I was also participating in the vocational rehab program. So they had a program that allowed people with disabilities to go to college after they completed their GED. So when I finished my GED at city colleges, I enrolled at another city college to get my associates for gerontology studies. And I learned so much about myself, and how I put it was because it was the physical and biomolecular part of the medication with dementia and delirium, and just learning the theories and concepts made me want to learn more about disability and everything that was happening to me. but I knew I didn't want to go into psychology. So, transfer student from city colleges, this is what we do. I got transferred to UIC and I saw the course, the Discipline for Disability and Human Development. And first, I picked it because I saw they had aging studies. That's what led me to it. But little did I know, I was actually opening up the text to life for myself.
Yeah, thank you for sharing what brought you to UIC. People come to college from many different walks of life, many different parts of their life, and with so many different experiences. And I think it's safe to say that your experience, what you brought to class, definitely helped me with what we were learning and just enhanced what we were talking about to have more personal experiences. Okay, so moving on to our next question. You mentioned a little bit that you didn't want to end up in psychology. And I find that interesting because a lot of our DHD programs are not so much focused on the psychology aspect or the like scientific analytical aspect. It's more seeing disability as a part of culture, a part of society, and something that comes about as a result of inaccessible attitudes and inaccessible environments. Now, what made you interested in learning more about disability in the way that these DHD classes talked about it, especially in terms of seeing things through the lens of the social model?
So that in particular is where I wanted to start. We learn in DHD that there is a medical model that has been practiced and is very ableist, discriminatory, and stigmatic to patients and not viewing a person as a human being, but as a patient who's just being managed by medicine. So in that case, I experienced that quite often. And what I found was that it leaves you with identity issues because you feel like you're so secluded or excluded from feeling normal because this is the way their programs are developed. And you think, okay, I'm not human. Is anybody like me? Like, why am I going through this? I'm taking the medication, I'm going to therapy, but I'm still very asymptomatic. So that created a struggle within my daily life. Barriers is what we call them, what I learned later on. That creates barriers. So it was a constant struggle just to try to keep my head over water and take care of my children, feel better for myself, and I just wasn't getting the proper support. And I did this. I was going in and out of institutions, voluntary and involuntary institutionalization into mental facilities, and it was only getting worse. And I didn't know what I was doing. So, learning the social model helped me understand that it was my environment that was playing a very vital, important part to how there were things that was not accessible to me. And that could be um, resources, supports, anything like just not being included in community things or not accepted for who I was and how I was different or how I thought different or how I act different or may have felt awkward in certain situations. So it just really made me think that this was like the light when I started DHD. I learned about dominant discourse and how those are other names for systemic racism or critical race theory that's played out in America with different cultures and the global South and things that take place as far as like colonialism for other countries that has created generational trauma that's embedded into our psyche. So when I started realizing, oh, I got to read about myself. I come from a diverse family. A lot of people in America are not completely one culture. So I had a lot of generational trauma that I was diving into and dealing with as I was growing over. My hair was playing a part in it, my identity, how I dressed, the music I listened to, everything was following me, like putting the pieces to the puzzle together to find out why was there so much discourse in my life that I couldn't actually realize. And I was trying so hard.
That was a beautiful answer, Jocelyn. I think what you spoke so well to was the isolating effects that disability can have, especially when it's only managed in a medicalized, through the medical model lens. When you're only seeing disability as something that needs to be analyzed, treated, and medicated away, yeah, you end up spending a lot of time in these health spaces that can sometimes be very dehumanizing, not intentionally. They just have a lot of people that they need to get through, and it can sometimes be easier to rely on shorthands or shortcuts to better diagnose and care for many people experiencing the same things. But sometimes it doesn't actually get to the real issue of what an individual needs, what a person needs to succeed. They need a community. They need community integration to feel connected to others and to feel like they are more than a patient, more than just somebody who needs to be cared for and pitied. So, thank you for your answer, Jocelyn. Now, I just have one last one before we talk a little bit more about self advocacy. You mentioned that right after your pregnancy, you started experiencing some symptoms and some disabling conditions. But after that period of your life, where would you say your mental health advocacy journey began?
So while I was experiencing very severe symptoms, I still was sort of like a pillar in the community. I was a licensed cosmetologist with the state of Illinois. I had two salons, and then I worked behind the chair. So when I started having children, I started working at home because I wanted to raise my children. And what I found out was that people will often come to me to feel better. And I was not feeling better. So, it didn't matter how much money I made, how many times I tried to reinvent myself, what project I took on. I just was at a disdain, a deterred environment in my mind. There was a lot of self doubt. So, what really helped me was when I started the DHD program, but when I actually took the vote within my own self to go back to school, they gave me all my power back from a dead end career, a relationship, and just like a nowhere to go. But what I can say is that I was guided by a higher system that helped me cultivate step by step the plan I took to take back my life from mental health, depression, the darkness, the crying, the sadness. So it started with stop smoking. I had to stop those bad habits that was stopping me. Stop drinking. I stopped drinking alcohol. Took care of my spirituality. I prayed more. I was always prayerful. I attend to my children. I learned about my children and things that were going on with them. And when other people saw me trying to help myself, that's when I started getting a sense of community. That's when I started getting it. And I didn't know it all then, but it was a fear, and I was just like, you gotta do it. You gotta keep going. It was so many times I was like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go. It was like, get up and go. Just go. I had this insane drive. And that's what really, really kicked in high gear to keep me focused, hyper focused.
Thank you for sharing, Jocelyn. That was a very good rundown of burnout. That feeling when you're just so mentally and physically exhausted that nothing you're really doing makes anything feel like it's any better. That's when you know like big changes need to be made. Like you mentioned, stop drinking, stop smoking, take care of your physical health, take care of your spiritual health. These are things that I'll be talking about later on, can be very helpful for addressing burnouts. And especially as advocates, as mental health advocates, especially knowing how to advocate sustainably to make sure you're not, giving so much of yourself, you're burning yourself to keep others warm. It is a very delicate balance of knowing how to care for others, what your responsibilities are to a larger community, but also realizing I am an individual who has needs and I am no use to anybody if I am just burnt out and, exhausted. So Yeah, it's all about finding that balance. I've learned, especially when it comes to
Some of the
advocacy.
spiritual people call it you pouring into somebody and your cup is not full. So you're giving everything and you're not getting, and you don't have anything to give. So you pour out and pour out and pour out, and your cup is empty. So you're depleted. You just
Yeah,
burn out.
it's a beautiful metaphor. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't give what you don't have. So learning, especially within the field of disability advocacy and activism, learning how to sustainably take care of yourself, to advocate with sustainability in mind, is a big concern.
Yes.
All right, so thank you for the introduction, Jocelyn. So, as a part of this podcast series, I've been trying to share my experiences as someone who grew up with a brother that has autism, as well as somebody who works in special education with children that have various intellectual and developmental disabilities, while also incorporating what I've learned about disability studies, disability culture, and basically my UIC DHD education into these discussions. And I'm hoping that by doing this, I can not only inform people who may not know as much about disability as myself or as somebody else who either grew up with a family member or works in the field of disability support service. I also want to try to reach out to people who have had similar experiences to me where they have a family member or a friend or somebody in their life they know who has difficulties or other disabilities, and provide them with the information that has really helped me come to terms with and accept my relationship to disability, and has given me just new tools and new words to describe the things that I see and the things that I feel, because it has been, like I said, a big help for me. It has helped me find my place within the disabled community as an ally. And today's episode about peer advocacy and self advocacy is unique because it's something that anybody and everybody, regardless of your relationship to disability, can and should engage with. It looks different for many different people, whether that's voting for a politician or a party that you believe in, or going to a protest or some kind of march that aligns with your values and how you want to see change in the world. So, for the sake of this episode, we'll be defining self advocacy as a complex set of behaviors or ideas that shape how an individual navigates the world and their own understanding of themselves and their identity. This definition was taken from the research article, The Importance of Disability Identity, Self Advocacy, and Disability Activism by Ivanova Smith and Carolyn Muller. Self advocacy is especially important for those with disabilities, as in this country, there is a long and unfortunate history disabled people not having their rights and autonomy respected unless and until they self advocate and demand change. In the 1998 TASH Resolution for Choice, the advocacy group TASH, which stands for the Association for Persons with Severe Handicaps, wrote that active attempts by people with severe disabilities to exercise control over their lives often has been described as problem behavior, instead of being seen for what it truly is, which is an attempt to regain control and autonomy over one's life. And because of this perception that, people with disabilities can advocate for themselves or they have nothing to advocate for, this idea of self advocacy and the practice of self advocacy has become an essential part of the disabled identity for many people who live with disabilities out of necessity, because other people will not recognize their unique needs or their rights unless people make noise, unless there is demand for change. Now, peer advocacy factors into this when one's advocacy efforts are focused primarily on the rights and needs of other people, whether they're an individual, like a family member, or an entire marginalized group. Many parents, siblings, and other family members of people with disabilities engage in peer advocacy in order to help loved ones navigate the world and make it a better place to live in. Just like my parents and my older cousins and my uncles growing up were advocates for my brother. And now that I've grown up, I've learned how to be an advocate for him because he unfortunately will never have the capacity to be able to advocate for what he needs any more than like saying I'm hungry or I need to go to the bathroom. And there are much more important things to life than being hungry and going to the bathroom. There is an entire legal system that we live within, and much of what it is that we are allowed to do is tied up in these ideas of legality, bureaucracy, and the society we live in. Now, part of being an advocate, self or peer, is having an understanding of oneself and one's identity. I've talked about the idea of a distinct disability identity in previous episodes. Disability identity is something that is personal to each person and their own experience living with disability. And it's sometimes developed over the course of someone's entire life, whether that's learning to accept an acquired disability after, living for many years able-bodied, or coming to terms with living in an inaccessible, ableist society as someone who does not fit the normative body mind, what we consider normal. And so we can define this experience as disability identity development, or a positive sense of self and feelings of connection to or solidarity with the disability community. And this definition is also taken from the Importance of Disability Identity, Self-Advocacy, and Disability Activism article. When discussing self-advocacy in the context of disability, we can't really separate it from the idea of disability identity development or community connection. All three have become a fundamental part of the disability experience. Like I've mentioned a few times in my life with my brother, I've seen how self-advocacy is supported by having a community of people with other families that have children with autism or Down syndrome. We would get together, we would get our loved ones to do social events like going out to the pool or the park or going bowling. And we would form a community around not just our loved ones, but the things that we have gone through and the experiences we have had, having to care for them, having to advocate for them, and create this communal identity around resistance, struggle, and challenging the status quo of what disability means. And they all factor into living with a disability and being an advocate. I don't want to speak so much because I want to leave some room for Jocelyn to talk about her experiences. I do have a few more thoughts that I'm hoping I can sneak in as I talk with you, Jocelyn, but I'd like to take a pause there and just ask, first and foremost, talking about self-advocacy so much, what role would you say self-advocacy plays in your life, in your relationships with your loved ones?
What my gift was or my talent with self advocacy was the lived experience. So this helped me separate how I felt, my past history, my background with mental health, which I call mental illness, but now I say I experience mental health because I have evolved into a different mind state of philosophy and behavior with mental health. So it helped me to be able to understand, be more empathetic. Empathy is just understanding somebody else's shoes, but I'm actually at the point where I feel you. Like I really can understand what has happened, what may have happened, and I'm able to navigate the help that they may need, or just planting that little seed, that thought, to help them get a fresh start, to rethink their situation, to maybe have that sign pop up and say, do you want to do that? You remember what happened last time, so just you see what I'm saying? Like you managing medication and you want to be consistent and you want to stay healthy. So there's things you need to do. So just being active, actively supporting people who are determined. Being an employment specialist taught me so much, in a job coach with other people who were intellectually, developmentally disabled, and also who were mental health and substance abuse users. What they wanted more than anything else was to be given a chance. They wanted to feel normal. They wanted to have autonomy. They wanted to have self determination. So helping them, like you mentioned about your brother, there's so much he can do, but he needs the supports. Making an accessible world is everything to some people who just don't have it by um, implicit bias or even not that, just discrimination. Also, with people of color, we have intersections. So helping people navigate ageism, sexism, race, gender. So there's multiple effects, multiple things that could really isolate you or create a barrier. And you may think you can't get the job because you're disabled, but it's because you're a woman, because you're over 50, because you're black. So you're still having a combination intersections of where everything just meets, it crashes out on you. So that can make you really feel like isolated and not love, really, not love, and it could make you, it could trigger you. It could trigger you, so I have to do this again and I'm going through this again, and it make you have setbacks. So people are on Social Security, fixed incomes. They want to work. They don't want to just have a fixed income and pay their rent and bills, and then they have nothing else left for the rest of the month. People want to actively work. And I understood that. So I was able to navigate the system to help them create goals and do things they want to do. And I'm not talking about people who were living with autism, but I had young men who were living with autism who was actually learning skills to go to work. And how they were working was because they had somebody standing there maybe holding the bag for them while they put the trash in it. But they were navigating, being able to make money and do the things they need to do to live an integrated, comprehensive life. So that's what I really enjoyed doing. And having those lived experiences taught me how to have more than empathy. I was really able to do more than just put myself in their shoes. I was able to actually focus and be good at it. And I have a passion for it, and it really helps me. It helps me with my mental health.
I can definitely say this much, Jocelyn. I would love to have in my life a pop up that comes up every time I'm gonna make like a dumb decision. Be like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Or "Do you remember what happened last
It
time you
takes
went out drinking?"
practice. It takes practice, but you know what? There were a lot of other things, especially like after pre-pandemic, that really show able-bodied people that now you know how I feel. Now you can feel a little bit. You got a year or what it was like to not have access to anything. And it was not fun to look at. It was not fun to look at. I didn't want to mention this, but social determinants of life, sometime with mental health, if you just have enough money to make it bad month to month, that helps with your mental health. Social economical states and things like that. And what you have to go out to your community and look at. So there's a lot of different factors that play in people's mental health, especially people of color that are disabled.
Absolutely. And then what you were mentioning before, talking about the intersections of disability and race, it also goes to show that disability can't really be looked at in a vacuum. There are so many aspects of living that impact one's experience, whether they're disabled, whether they are part of a marginalized group. Even a kind of disability can have an impact on how someone is seen, how someone is treated. Disability is an inherently intersectional identity, as we've learned in our classes. There is so much that goes into the idea of what does it mean to be disabled. Is it just having a physical deformity, or does it mean not being able to participate in a larger sense? What does participation mean? Because that is different from community to community, country to country, culture to culture. So yeah, so much of how we think about disability is really rooted in our ideas of racism, sexism, all the different isms and phobias, and how we create these delineations between people. All right, now my next question is kind of similar to what we were sort of getting to, just talking about the idea of disability history and disability pride. How has learning about disability through looking at history and looking at the idea of disability as an identity, how has it shaped your outlook on disability self-advocacy since you have taken those classes?
So, what my disability studies and being a disability advocate did for me, and a peer support specialist and a mental health first aider, it showed me how to take my confidence back because it showed me how to create resistance to things I didn't want to have to deal with, or I didn't want to have to put up with, even with myself, you know, resistance. I want to wear my hair in a afro today. I want to wear it curly. I don't want to be judged because I wear it straight. I don't want you to touch it. I want to wear it in braids. I want to wear it up in a bun. Just having that self identity to take care of myself. It helped me understand how to take care of my children. My son was supported by his school, by the staff, and they gave me a platform to be able to help other moms. Now, because of my disability, a lot of moms did not actually navigate towards me, but I kept trying because I already had this sense of I'm isolated, I'm introverted, or I have sensory issues. I feel awkward, only music could calm me down. So I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm still gonna put it out there for the people. Somebody's gonna get it. And it's some things are overnight and some things are years. So I invested in 10 years into putting my program together for disability and advocating for others, and just being that I listen, I don't judge. And whatever you need, I can help you with. Or if I don't know, I can get you to the right resource. Do you need this? Do you need that? You want to go? So just trying to get on a baseline of helping other women, men, teens, because teenage years is very hard. I have a brother that is undiagnosed, and it's very hard for me because I watched him since we were children. And it's just a lot of patience, understanding, talking, dysregulating, recentering, and just being able to be there for him no matter what mind state he's in. And it's a roller coaster, but it doesn't matter, because I know. And a lot of these things are genetic. So just trying to get people who have symptoms, like with my son, I had to explain to him, first of all, do you understand that you have a disability? First of all, to educate, because that's what I found that people just didn't know. They didn't know terms. We have all our new terms: no handicap, no, idiot, or, so just re-educating the mind on what our verbiage is for language, so we're not stuck in 1950s thinking that homosexuality is actually crazy, or a wife that has get put in a crazy house by her husband because he found her cheating or something. So just shifting the information and being comprehensive and progressive in disability, learning your policies and legislature. I had to learn IDEA, 504 Rehabilitation Act, ADA, for everything that was happening. It was so many parts, and I had to learn it all to be able to be successful in what I was doing. Workshops, disabled people. I had to go back to 1935. What's his name? Gerald Ford, with the workshop vouchers, certificates for people who were disabled, getting paid $1, $2 to work for 8 to 10 hours. That's absolutely terrible. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be done in the 21st century.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Jocelyn, just talking about everything that we have learned in these classes, from the legality to the history, especially the history. I feel like we don't spend enough time in our core curriculum talking about disability history, the history of institutionalization, of the eugenics movement that started in America and inspired the Nazi movement of Germany in the 1930s, and just how horribly people who were perceived as different or inferior or just not worthy, just how terribly they were treated just because they were seen as being a certain way. I think I will always be a proponent for learning about all aspects of history, but I think disability history, learning about it in my college years, was an eye-opening experience, especially in the US. Things that have happened even like closer in time to where we are. I don't know if you saw on YouTube the documentary The Men of Adalisa, about the sheltered workshop where adults with autism and other intellectual and developmental disabilities were taken to a turkey farm and basically kept in horrendous conditions of indentured servitude of this is where you live and you're gonna like work at this turkey processing plant and that's just your existence now. If you haven't seen it on YouTube, I highly recommend anybody listening to go out and give it a watch. Men of Atalisa, Atalissa. It is definitely worth the watch. But the other thing you were talking about in your answer to that question was kind of going back to what I mentioned about how the ideas of disability identity development, self advocacy, and community connection all play into the disability experience. As you learned more about disability and how it can be seen as a part of someone's identity, you mentioned how you wanted to just reach out to people more. You wanted to be the person that others came to when, you know, they maybe had a question about something or they wanted to know more about a certain part of a law like IDEA or the ADA. That process of disability identity development being strengthened by seeking out connection with others and, you know, being or like trying to be the advocates, and then that sense of seeing disability as a identity, as something you can build like a political community around that encourages self-advocacy is a great way of navigating the ableism, stigma, and discrimination that people with disabilities face. And then understanding that maybe together we can do things more effectively, together with people who understand these things that I've been through, who understand that there is an injustice or there is something that should be changed, finding those people and seeing them not as, you know, separate interests or separate issues that need to be addressed, but seeing the root of those problems and working as a larger collective to address them is a hallmark of what we've learned about the disability community and the way they approach advocacy and activism. And I hear a lot of that in the answers that you're given. Thank you for sharing all of your experiences. The next question I have is about community. It's kind of a simpler one. What role did community play in your recovery and managing your mental health?
So this is the thing. Going to school opened doors for me to be able to gain access to community. I was no longer on the couch. I was now in the chair and people were on the couch. So what this allowed me to do was start thinking bigger, like, why isn't there more healthcare systems, accessible healthcare systems, mental health providers in our community that's affordable? Why isn't there trucks out that just ride the neighborhood, helping people with needles, new clean needles, hygiene bags, and food or little sandwiches, juice, something homeless people may need. It helped me to start thinking about, because of my past experiences in the penal system as a young adult, to go back now that I have processed all that information, to go back into the jail system and talk to young women or men that's on the wrong path. because we know a lot of those young adults and people in jail have mental health conditions. And the only reason why they're in there is because they can have access to medicine or rehabilitation to maybe or maybe not be integrated back into society and use a productive life and have a productive life. Working with other community organizations, non for profits, meeting people, networking, get references, resources out there into the community. So just trying to, where I'm not tearing down the community anymore, I'm trying to build up everywhere I go. And also, never burning a bridge that I cross, so I can always go back and have that reference, that support when I need it. So it's a very diverse, it's very complicated, it's a very lovely place, having, as you mentioned, that collective thought, like for liberation, actually. And I know they always say the revolution will not be televised, but if we could just change our mindset to think differently, that's where it starts, because it's all in your head. It's all in your head. Just try to think better. What you see, what you say, what you breathe, what you hear. You have to manage those symptoms. I am actively not taking medication anymore because of some other things that were going on with me. And it has been such a power struggle with the healthcare system, because taking medicine is a big thing for big pharma for people in America. So I sort of stepped into the next playing field of advocacy against the healthcare system and just actively taking charge and advocating for myself. And it's not for everybody. I don't advise everybody to do it, but in my particular circumstance, it was the best thing that I need to do for myself. So my son, helping him navigate. Everybody's not going to be the same. There's small things you could do. Teachers. I love teachers. Teachers are so helpful. They're so helpful. They'll educate you. They'll get you the flyers. They'll give you the workshops. They'll get you the retreats. Just navigating with people who are more in tune with what we need to do for the community, because we have to eat, sleep, and do you know what here. So get it together. Try to get it together.
Yeah, no, community or like working with different community organizations can be such a great experience. Not only because you're doing something, good, but it's also like a visible way of seeing there are others who either have gone through certain similar things or who understand why I care about this thing or why this is something that needs to be addressed. And it's making collective efforts with, similar like ways of thinking of already being on that same page, having that same mindsets. It just feels like you're at a better jumping off point, or that, you feel like now that there's enough people or there's enough ideas like mine, maybe we can make this happen. Maybe we can like truly make change now that, like physically there's more of us. Now, this next part has to do with identity, especially self identity. So, in what ways would you say your work and experience with disabilities and those who have them have impacted your identity, as in how you see yourself, and your outlook on the world, especially after having your personal experiences with disability and going through learning about disability academically at UIC?
So what I do now, I'm more aware. My spidey senses are always on. Like people in wheelchairs, people who have hearing aids, people who have impaired vision, people who have cerebral palsy, people who live with autism. I'm so in tune with disability, any type, all type, children. Then, and this is the thing that helped me. Now that I can understand how to manage mine, I'm in a better place to help you understand yours. I'm not licensed to clinically diagnose anybody. I'm not a therapist. I don't claim that. This is not an ego trip. But also taking the steps to do things I'm supposed to do, like write it down. Just write it down. Journal it. Give steps. I have a daughter, she's studying to be a psychologist. And I feel for her because that is such a hard job nowadays with everything that's going on. And I'm like, do you really want to do that? And she's like, yes, but the way she's explains it and understands it by just watching me. So sort of like you with your brother, it's absolutely fantastic to watch. And I just sometimes I sit there and I cry when I'm talking to her because I'm like, it took me all these years, like it's finally, oh my God, it's finally happening. So it's like being able to talk to other children, young children, mothers, whoever, help older adults with dementia, wherever I can show my stewardship, taking care of myself, practicing self care is what I'm saying. Because if I'm not in a good position or condition, I can't help you. Researching everything, researching, interviewing. I love to interview. When I go to places now, I meet people, I see them. Tell me about yourself. How's your day? What's going on with you? You never know. They could have had a death in the family, traumatic grief, survivor's guilt, so many different things that played a part. Moms, CRSSs. It's so many different components to disability. It's absolutely, and the definition that I absolutely gravitated towards is fluid. So fluid means it has so many components. It's very diverse. It's multidimensional. It's up and down. It's waves. It's phenomenal. So people ask me, are you disabled? I'm like, yes, I'm disabled, but I don't feel disabled because I'm able to do things for myself. I had a neighbor. She was legally blind. This lady read Braille and everything, but she would travel. She was on a bowling team. She sang in a choir. She took the transportation. And she was way more active. Her quality of life seemed so much more better than mine. Madball, the young men who were croquet players, Madball, and they were in the wheelchairs.
But yeah,
UK
Murder Ball.
Murder Ball. I'm
Yeah, that
sorry.
was the name
Yes,
of
Murder
the
Ball.
documentary and also the name of the
Yes, Murder
sports.
Ball.
I think it was
Now
renamed
they
to
were very
wheelchair
athletic.
handball or
Yes, they
something.
were.
Yeah.
They were very group like aggressive, athletic, but they were bound to wheelchairs. So it was just a state of your mind. It's where you wanna think you are that make you feel like you can't overcome that obstacle, and having the right resources too.
Yeah. I think there's a term for what you're describing there. It's descriptively disabled. It's where someone might have some of the lived experience of being disabled, maybe like having a certain condition or not being able to participate in certain aspects,
Yes,
but
yes, yes, yes.
maybe you don't feel disabled. Like you can still do other
Yes,
things
you could still,
independently.
if it's accessible.
Yeah,
Velcro
exactly.
shirts, Velcro shoes. If it's accessible, you can still accomplish the things you need to do to have a good quality of life. I'm not saying it's not happening. No, don't get me wrong. No, I'm not saying it's not happening, but there's if it's accessible, it takes away the barrier.
Yeah, and I really liked at the beginning of your answer when you said it's like my spidey senses are always on. I definitely felt that way. After leaving my DHD class, I just became more aware of the environment and the potential for inaccessibility in a lot more of the public places that I go, more so than when I was just growing up with my brother. Now I'm a bit more cognizant of those who may have physical or mobility needs, seeing what parts of the environment may not work the best for them. And again, it goes back to what we were saying before about you can't pour from an empty cup. Part of your answer was saying after having this experience and knowing how, after going to DHD classes and learning about disability academically, you can better see how your disability plays a part in your life and also how to manage, how to learn to live and not try to resist, like going with the flow almost of
Yeah,
the disability, of
the
allowing it to be
disability, yes.
fluid. Yeah,
Yeah.
of in some contexts it's not as big or it's not as debilitating of an issue, but in other contexts it can be much more disabling, making you
Yes,
unable to
because
participate.
yes, because as much as I can do, I still have limitations. I still am aware that it's an everyday struggle. It could be anything else that compromise my mental health, but I have to work on creating that solution within my mind, and that's all I'm saying. What works for me to help me to be able to navigate, because I already been down that road with my children, and I just feel like I have worked so hard and have invested so much that I just do not want to have to accept that anymore. And that's me talking to me. That's me in the mirror. That's not me going to the doctor or anybody like that. Yeah. So,
Well, I have one more question for you, Jocelyn, and I think this kind of ties all of disability advocacy work together. In what ways do you think your work and experience with disability challenges the status quo of how society sees people with disabilities?
well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm no longer on the other side of the window. Education, being educated, being able to find a voice, because I felt like in my depression and my disability, being silent was holding me back. It was the big bad monster. Finding a voice, talking to people, taking care of myself. I guess to the point where I was like, if I'm not accepted by the community that I thought I wanted to be, I can go find community elsewhere. Disability art, disability legal studies, managing people with their mental capacity or legal capacity to advocate for themselves. Um, Reading more about things that was important to me, doing things that was important to me. Spoken word, going to museums. So instead of therapy, I swapped out for spoken word. So I write poetry that helps me with how I feel, and I'm able to put things down on paper and use my creative side. So that's another thing that helped me do what I want to do. Starting projects. I have a coaching business. I have a t-shirt business, a hair business. I sell insurance. So finding different ways to help people who need help. People who are on Social Security, on fixed incomes. This is where my primary target population is at, with insurance. So moms with children, single fathers, older adults in long-term care, people who really need it. So it's just finding a way to help people navigate through life so they could have a better quality of life. We're all going to have something, and this might sound like my philosophy right now, but we're all going to have some morbidity to ourselves. But if you try to plan, set some goals, and listen to your community network, you will be okay. There's things right now you wouldn't even believe I won't even go do, but I'm like, I'm going to go to UIC and see about everybody in the DHD course and call everybody and promote and, support them and network with them, because it's a common clause, it's a commonality. Like, it's politically, we speak from what has happened to us, and we have a collective thought for social justice, disability advocacy. All of those things that took place in America relates to us and what we're doing now, our cohort. So a lot of people know sooner. I just get on a little bit later. My symptoms attack me later in life, but I'm glad I'm here, and there's other things that I want to do, and I'm going to keep moving forward, keep pushing against the machine, rage against the machine, whatever you call it. I'm gonna just do it every day, and basically it's for my children, so they'll know how to be like you was, allies for other people with disabilities. Never laugh at that. Always have empathy and help somebody if you can. Be a steward to people who are marginalized.
Yeah, I think societally, like dominant discourses about people with disabilities is that they don't have a voice or they all have the same voice because they all want the same things. But you talking about being able to find your voice through education. I think we haven't talked enough in this episode about how being educated on disability, especially on your own disability and your own symptoms, can truly empower you to not only know more about what you're going through, but to understand it on like a personal, mental, like spiritual level, almost to come to
Yes.
acceptance with the fact that we are all of the nature to grow old, to get sick, and to one day pass away, but that there are certain things that we can do not only to just prevent those, but to learn to live a life in harmony with those ideas that one day I'm going to get old, I'm not going to be able to walk as good as I used to or hear as well as I do now. So maybe learning a little bit of sign language now could help me communicate in the future, or exercising and eating healthy can help, heart health or my cardiovascular health. It is all connected, and it is a big challenge of the status quo, I think, to be educated about disabilities and to also have that voice to say it's okay to be disabled. It's okay to live or to not live up to the normative standard of what we want our ideal bodies and minds to be, that our diversity not only makes us strong, but it makes us human. Like if we were all just the
Yes.
same carbon copy, same health, same features, then this planet would be a very, very boring place. But there's so much diversity and so much amazing difference out there that this world will never run out of interesting things to show us or ways to surprise us. Jocelyn, thank you so very, very much for joining me today. I really, like I mentioned, was flattered by the fact that you reached out to me and wanted to be a part of this podcast series that I've been working on. And I really enjoyed interviewing you before we got to this episode and just getting to know a little bit more about you and your story. It was an honor and a pleasure to be in class with you, and I'm so glad I got the chance to interview you.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate your platform. It's needed. The thing about me is I just want to help somebody else who may be having the same symptoms. That's all I want to do. So just to help them navigate. It may not, their process may not be like mine, but just to give them those skills that just drop them nuggets so they can start to get on the right way, and whatever that looks like for them, because we all are other people, share our own identity.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I definitely, again, part of the reason I started this series was because I wanted to reach out to people who have been through similar things to me to let them know, hey, it's all right. Other people have been through this and they know they've learned a few things. You will come out the other end of this okay. Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode on disability, peer, and self advocacy. If you learned something here or found something in this episode interesting, leave a comment and share this episode with a friend. Self advocacy is something we can all benefit from, and I hope you took something away from our discussion that can help you on your journey. And remember, even if you personally don't have or don't know anybody with a disability, chances are that someone you know loves someone with a disability. And now you know a little bit more about living with a disability and the advocacy behind it. We'll see you next time.